Hey there, BookTube. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am starting a series called A Closer Book. At the end of January, I gave you a recap of the 9 books that I read during the month. The challenge that posed is that now I have 9 books that I want to talk about in a video that I don't want to last too long. What eventually happened was I glossed over the books. All I did was I told you what the book was about and how I rated it. But I didn't really get to delve into that long, exquisite conversation that I'd like to have with you about why I love the book, the themes, how the author brought out the themes, whether it was too sad and why it was too sad and what I would have changed about it, or how the character impacted me, how I connected with the character, that kind of thing. Those are the things that I love to talk about. Listen, I really love to talk about books. It's why I started my YouTube channel. It's why I do reading challenges. It's why I participate in reading sprints. It's why I'm here. It's how I start off a lot of the conversations. A lot of the conversations that I have with people is, so I read this book about, I love talking about books. And the purpose of me being here is not to do recaps. The purpose of me having a YouTube channel is so I can talk about books. So my solution is I'm still gonna do my recaps at the end of the month because that is how I keep track of how I am doing, how I'm progressing, whether or not I'm meeting my goals, I'm on track to meeting my reading goals. Some of the challenges that I participate in are monthly challenges. So I still have to do that monthly recap. But during the month, I'm gonna be talking about books in small groups. In order for me to do what I want to do, I think I'm going to talk about these books in groups of 3. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about the first 3 books that I read in 2017. The next video, part 2, is going to be the next 3 books that I read in 2017, and so on and so on and so on, until you're probably going to be tired of me at the end of December when I have read my goal 102 books in 2017. So stick around for my first video in the series, A Closer Book. The first book I read in January was Shylock is My Name by Howard Jacobson. Shylock is My Name is a modern day retelling of Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. If you're not familiar with the original story, the Merchant of Venice is about a Jew, Shylock, who makes a deal with Antonia. Antonia is standing as a guarantor for his friend's loan, and Shylock doesn't like him, and he's looking for a way to exact revenge kind of on Antonio. Antonia offers a pound of flesh to Shylock in exchange for this debt that he is standing guarantor for his friend. When the deal goes sour, of course, Antonio owes Shylock this pound of flesh, and Shylock decides that he's going to take the pound of flesh that's closest to Antonia's heart because he wants to kill him. In this retelling, Jacobson exaggerated the importance of religion in the story, and he focuses on the difference between Christian and Jewish customs. He made the pound of flesh a metaphor for everything that a man holds dear to him: his livelihood, his hobbies, his goods, his daughter, his genitalia. However, by making clever use of the idea of circumcision as the method to exact this pound of flesh that is due him, I thought the book was very well crafted. I found the themes to be very well depicted. I thought it stayed true to the original idea of the story, but gave so much more. And the language, I think, was a little or a lot pedantic, kind of superfluous. I didn't think that he needed to use, I'm just using those words because he uses those kinds of words. I didn't think that he needed to use some of the language that he did in order to communicate the ideas. So the book came off a little scholarly, a little over the cuff, but it was a wonderful read. Because of the vocabulary, because of the language, I think there might have been people who this book would not have reached, and so I had to take off a star for that. So I ended up rating it, I think, 4 stars. The second book I read in January was Paris for One and Other Stories by Jojo Moyes. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I fell in love with Jojo Moyes' writing in 2016. I read Me Before You. I met Jojo Moyes at a book signing. I went on to read 6 other of her novels in 2016. She was a very influential person in my reading experience last year. So when I found out that she had published a new book, I was all gung-ho for this. So what did I think? Do you think that I loved it or not? Hint, I gave it a 3.5 star rating on Goodreads. I read Me Before You and the sequel to that book, After You. Those were the first 2 books that I read from her, which were also her most recently published works. up until that point. So when I read that and I fell in love with her writing, I went back and read others of her book, but those were backlisted publications. So when I found out that she was going to be publishing a brand new book, I was really excited. This is not really a short story collection because the first story in here, Paris for One, is actually a novella. It actually goes on for 150 pages. The other 124 pages is taken up with 8 other short stories. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed reading the stories. However, there was nothing groundbreaking or spectacular, truly spectacular about this book. I think the theme of these stories is that Moyes was trying to write about strong characters, strong females, women who just did ordinary everyday things to make their lives better, women who made better choices, women who probably hadn't been making really good choices in their life up until this point, but were finally starting to take charge and take control of their lives, which is kind of a recurring theme in a lot of her writings. I thought that kind of stayed true as like a theme that weaves through her writings, but there wasn't really anything spectacular about this book. So the book is only 274 pages. The first 150 pages is taken up with that first story, Paris for One, which is about a young woman, Nell. I think she's in her mid-20s. She has a very lackluster personality. She is averse to taking risks. She's very safe. She plays life very safe. She finally meets this guy and he becomes her boyfriend, and she she gets a bonus at work, and she decides on a whim, because people are kind of teasing her that she's so safe, she decides on a whim to buy 2 tickets for Paris weekend. She lives in England, and she decides she and her boyfriend, they'll take the train to Paris and spend a romantic weekend. The boyfriend actually stands her up at the train station, so she ends up going to Paris alone and has this adventure that changes her life, changes her outlook, changes her perspective on life, but also the way she lives it. That is the theme that weaves through the rest of the stories. However, because we now have, for the rest of the book, we now have 124 pages that are taken up with 8 stories, the stories themselves are too short, I think, for you to actually get proper character development. So the characters, they don't stay with you. They're not like Louisa in Me Before You, who long after you finish reading that story, you keep remembering her. You remember her funny clothes and her funny way of thinking about things, and the character stays with you kind of as a friend who follows you through life. There isn't that in this book, and that I felt was missing. So I rated this book 3.5 stars. The next one is Mr. Potter by Jamaica Kincaid. Jamaica Kincaid is an Antiguan writer. She now lives in the United States. I think she lives in Vermont. She lived and worked in New York for a long time. She used to write for the New Yorker magazine, so you might know her from that. My first introduction to Jamaica Kincaid was my freshman English class. I read one of her kind of short poems, or long poems, short stories, which was entitled Girl, which is about a woman who is receiving instructions from her mother about how to live life and the things that she should do in order to have a good life like her mother does. Anyway, this book, Mr. Potter, is a novel, but it seems like a fictionalized version of Jamaica Kincaid's actual life, because the narrator in the story, the woman who is narrating the story, has a very similar life as Jamaica Kincaid does. She's a woman who has left her West Indian hometown and now lives in America as a writer, which is very similar to Jamaica Kincaid. I don't want to say Jamaica because that's my country. She's not from Jamaica. That's a long story. It's similar to Jamaica Kincaid's actual life experience. So, Mr. Potter is about this fictional narrator's father. She doesn't know him, only met him once, but she is imagining kind of and she's tracing his roots, she's tracing his family history, meeting his parents as children, as young people, long before they had him, meeting her father as a baby, and tracing his life, tracing his roots, to him becoming the person that he is, even though she doesn't know him. So a lot of this book is kind of like, how would I say it? It's kind of like a rambling, which is you trying to imagine how something that you have no way of knowing would actually have happened. So the story is about the narrator's father. His name is Roderick Potter. It is the story of his parents abandoning him, and him living out that generational tendency by also abandoning her as a baby. It is about the lessons that Mr. Potter would have learned from his non-relationship with his parents, and the non-relationship that he would also go on to cultivate with her, the narrator, and his other children. It is about the generational issues that he would have inherited from his parents through their genes and would have passed on to her, and her attempts to break that chain, to break that cycle. Kincaid's writing style is extremely unique. She starts the book in the middle of Mr. Potter's life and traces his everyday life, his everyday experiences, and shows how those experiences how those experiences are part of what makes him who he is. The book starts kind of in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a thought. She uses repetition very, very effectively. She keeps saying the same thing over and over and over, which kind of makes you think, why she keep telling me that? She's told me that already. Why do you keep telling me that? You've told me that already. That's what I was thinking when I was reading the book. But she uses it to such great advantage in that at the end of the story, the things that she has repeated over and over are the things that she just wants you to know. This is her father. This is what he did. This man that didn't know her. The fact that he couldn't read and write. The fact that he was illiterate, and she broke the cycle by becoming not just literate, but being a person who writes for a living. The fact that he couldn't read and write, so he didn't tell his story, he didn't have a chance to tell his story, and that now, even though he has abandoned her, she is the one gifted with this opportunity to tell his story to the world. The book was such a fascinating look at relationships between parent and child, about generational cycles, generational curses, which is a subject that I've been fascinated about. You'll know I talk about it a lot. One of the most fascinating passages that I found in this book, however, was a passage that I bookmarked. See, I have a post-it, even though this is a library book. It is about this man who is her father, who didn't really tell her who he was, and her having to find out about him from other sources. And she says, no one could be really known until they're dead. Only when you're dead can a person be really known, because when you are dead, then you cannot modify your actions. You're in a state of such stillness, the permanent stillness that is death. You cannot reply to accusations. You cannot make a wrong right. You cannot ask forgiveness. You cannot make a counteraction so as to make a wrong seem not to have occurred at all. You make the wrong perfect in the imagination. You make the wrong perfect in actuality. Another thing that is very unique about this book, there is absolutely no conversation, there's absolutely no dialogue. That little passage that I just read for you kind of sums it up. This book is about this man's life, but he has no opportunity to contribute to the conversation. So the book is not a conversation. It is just her musings, her thoughts. The book is fascinating. If you haven't read Jamaica Kincaid, I suggest that you pick her up. I don't know why it took me so long to finally read this book. I'm very happy that I did, and I would encourage you to check out Jamaica Kincaid's writings. This is a really short book. It's only 195 pages. I gave this book 5 stars. I mean, how could you not? So that is the first in the series of A Closer Book. That's me discussing the first 3 books that I read in 2017. Come back for the next video, which is going to be the next 3 books that I've read since then. So thanks for watching my video. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel if you're not already. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you like this video. If you prefer to hear me talk a little or a lot longer about these books, and what is the favorite of the books that I read? Have you read any of these authors? Have you read any of Howard Jacobson's novels? I think Howard Jacobson won the 2010 Man Booker Award. If you've read any of his novels, let me know what you think about his writing. And Jojo Moyes. If you're a Jojo Moyes fan, leave me a comment down below so we can chat about her, her book. If you've read any Jamaica Kincaid novels, what do you suggest that I read next from her? I do have See Now Then on my TBR, but aside from that, what other Jamaica Kincaid novel would you recommend? So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're not already, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!